It finally occurred, everyone. Maurice Scott broke his quiet in the most surprising way after months of silence at the age of 45. Immediately after Kimmi publicly slapped him on tape, fans were astounded by the video. But what has everyone buzzing is Maurice's icy, calculating answer. Is this the start of something far darker, or the end of their marriage? You won't be able to speak after what we're about to reveal, so keep watching. Let's face it, marriage and love. There has always been drama in Huntsville. However, fans couldn't have been prepared for what transpired between Maurice Scott and Kimmi Grant Scott, and we mean nothing. They were viewed by spectators for years as the quiet pair who stayed out of the most of the chaos. However, that picture-perfect facade suddenly fell apart in the most painful and visible way imaginable. All of this occurred during a contentious gathering where emotions ran high, secrets were alluded to, and tempers erupted. Normally calm and quiet, Kimmi smacked Maurice in front of the cameras, other actors, and the world, and the internet went crazy. The fans were taken aback. Speculation was exploding on blogs. Maurice remained mute despite this. Up until now, there have been no interviews or angry posts on Instagram, because Maurice has finally answered at 45. Not only were his remarks defensive, but they were also calculatedly icy. This goes beyond a spouse responding to his wife's tantrum. This man is figuring out how to safeguard his reputation, his pride, and possibly even his trade secrets. However, why did Kimmi first lose her temper like that? According to some insiders, what has been accumulating over the years is more important than what Maurice accomplished on that particular day. From covert signals to emotional neglect to the silent dissolution of a marriage that was once cited as the moral compass of the program. And have faith that not all was captured in the video. We are dissecting everything in this in-depth analysis. The true cause of the smack that was heard throughout Huntsville, Kimmi's emotional state, and the claims made by friends that she has been concealing Maurice's purposefully delayed answer and its true implications, the startling hints that suggest their marriage may be ending, as well as the implications for the future of the Love and Marriage Huntsville franchise. You won't believe what we found out. It becomes quite unpleasant, emotional, and wild at this point. This isn't just reality TV anymore, so fasten your seatbelt. This is actual life, and it's happening in front of us. You already know that Kimmi and Maurice Scott were formerly viewed as the mature couple if you've been watching Love and Marriage Huntsville from the beginning. No controversies involving cheating or yelling matches, at least not in public. Two professionals juggling their careers, starting a mixed family, and avoiding the limelight that often destroys couples on reality TV. However, there are instances when the most cohesive couples are the ones that are having the greatest internal conflict. There were faint fissures in the foundation before the slap, before the stress peaked. Kimmi would become irritated in her candid interviews after viewers began to notice season after season. Frequently dismissive, Maurice would avoid her concerns or transfer the blame. Do you recall those moments when Kimmi expressed her feelings of emotional isolation? How Maurice neglected his responsibilities as a husband and stepfather because of his fixation with his career status and being perceived as the boss. A lot of fans dismissed it, but Kimmi was warning us. Not loud ones, but cautions nonetheless. According to multiple production-related sources, their marital strife started to escalate off-camera well before this season. Insiders claim that Kimmi had been complaining about Maurice's propensity to act for the cameras while ignoring the truth at home, emotional distance, and lack of intimacy. Fans were also taken aback by Maurice's apparent lack of emotional support when Kimmi was diagnosed with cancer, a moment that should have brought them together. Yes, supportive in words, but lacking in emotion. It seems as though he was unsure of how to seem when the cameras weren't rolling. According to a former production assistant, Maurice filmed Kimmi's hospital journey as if the episodes were interviews rather than authentic moments. He reportedly paid attention to lighting, requested retakes, and even left early on days when the movie was being filmed. That isn't how a man who is totally invested in his wife's struggle would act. It became evident that Kimmi wasn't only exhausted by the time this season arrived. She was worn out on an emotional level. The fact that the smack wasn't only a reflex is what makes it so telling. It was the result. A woman repressing years of disillusionment. A wife whose devotion was overextended. A cancer patient who ultimately made the decision that enough was enough. But don't worry, this is only the start. You will be much more horrified by Maurice's answer if you were stunned by Kimmi's conduct. It was quick, too quickly. a single second. The group conversation among the actors was controlled yet tense, the same type that we've seen on Love and Marriage dozens of times. Huntsville, followed by a sudden slap, in front of astonished co-stars, a motionless production team, and blinking cameras that weren't even sure whether to continue filming. Kimmi's hand made contact with Maurice's face. But for a moment, let's go back. The dinner was intended to be therapeutic. You know, one of those gatherings where the actors decide to settle their disputes amicably and respectfully. Kimmi, however, entered with a different kind of enthusiasm this time. She was described by onlookers as being calm, collected, and focused rather than irate, which is frequently more hazardous than rage. Maurice, however, was smug. He made some caustic comments about moving on, how everyone should stop dwelling on the past, and how real guys don't talk about feelings, they fix problems. According to leaked video that was never used. Kimmi apparently lost it at that point, although not in a furious outburst. Getting up, she approached Maurice and stated, "You don't get to downplay my healing because you refuse to do your own." She then looked him in the eye, then a slap, hard enough to hush the room and shake Maurice out of his illusion that everything was all right, but not hard enough to hurt. This is where the situation becomes even more intriguing. The audio in the final broadcast version was reduced by producers. In order to prevent viewers from hearing what Kimmi said, immediately after she struck him, a dramatic music overlay was played over the voices. She then said, "That was for every time I cried and you weren't there," according to someone in the room. Take a moment to process that. It has nothing to do with ego. It wasn't a show, not even to publicly shame him. It was a lady speaking in the only language she thought Maurice would comprehend, bringing to the surface sorrow that had been suppressed for years. Startle. According to reports, even Martel, who is typically the most unruly cast member, said to Melody, "Yo, that man had it coming." Melody simply nodded as well. Within minutes of the smack broadcasting, social media went crazy. Kimmi and Kios hail from Maurice. On TikTok and Twitter, Scott and Lam were trending. Responses were flooding in. Some were astonished, some were encouraging, and some were standing up for Maurice. But there was a recurring theme. Nobody anticipated that Kimmi would be the one to shatter the peace physically. What they don't want you to know, though, is this. Another angle was present. Just prior to the slap, Maurice's face was captured on a crew member's phone recording. He didn't look shocked. It was disdain. He grinned. She was not taken seriously by him. He didn't think she would ever physically or emotionally defend herself. And the last spark was ignited at that instant, that contemptuous grin. According to insiders, that clip was purposefully left out in order to save Maurice's reputation. It also raises the question of how much more has been altered to maintain Maurice's image as the cool, unconcerned alpha male. How did Maurice react, then, after witnessing the slap and hearing what wasn't broadcast? Was he contrite, defensive, contemptuous, or trustworthy? Everyone was astonished by his next move. Maurice Scott vanished after the slap went viral. No cast announcements, no press conferences, no Instagram captions saying we're working things out. Nothing but quiet. And the stillness said a lot for a man who was known for being measured, slick, and occasionally even manipulating with his remarks. Fans waited for an answer for almost a month. Would Maurice offer an apology? Would he reveal the true cause of Kimmi's public breakdown? Or would he keep portraying himself as the calm guardian while allowing his wife to bear the entire emotional burden? When the answer did arrive, it wasn't said. The Instagram live was well planned. There were no tears or background music, just Maurice sitting in his office with that recognizable smirk and a business jacket. It was more of a business presentation than a heart-to-heart. And that's what instantly turned off viewers. "You know," he said, "things happen in life. People's emotions run high, and they occasionally behave in ways that are inconsistent with who they are. We don't cancel them because of that. It indicates that we allow them time to recover." Doesn't that sound professional? But take note of what's absent. Nothing about the slap, no specific reference to Kimmi, no responsibility. Instead of framing the entire event as the product of years of emotional neglect, communication breakdown, and silent resentment, he presented it as something that simply happened, like a chance lightning strike. Then the worst part arrived. It is always expected of men to be flawless in terms of providing, protecting, and performing, but never feeling. We're told we're too analytical, too cold, or not emotional enough when we attempt to communicate. He played the victim, the misunderstood husband who was really trying to act morally while everything was against him. And believe me when I say that the backlash came right away. The comments were inundated by fans. You have yet to admit the emotional harm you caused her. Maurice, you're talking about your emotional work while she had cancer. In other words, you essentially stated nothing. Immediately following the conclusion of the live, Tiffany, a more recent cast member, shared a mysterious tweet. The loudest people tend to say the least, which is funny. Not to be overlooked is PR damage control. Maurice shared a picture of himself with his son on social media a few hours after the live event, writing, "Being a father is my greatest role," a clear attempt to draw attention back to his reputation as a family man. However, some close to Kimmi said that she was incensed at the way he handled it. According to a blogger, a close friend said, Kimmi expected honesty, not a sob story. She hoped he would at last be honest and quit striving to look flawless. Rather, he caused her to feel bad about him once more. Kimmi was raw, sensitive, and obviously upset by what had happened, and the contrast was stark. Maurice was aloof, polished, and passive-aggressive, and that separation could be the last straw that destroys their marriage. Because Kimmi was left holding the facts by herself once more, while he was preoccupied with defending his suit, his brand, and his reputation. This is where everyone was taken aback. Here we are then. Everyone's attention was drawn to the slap. Maurice's icy, well-crafted Instagram live made headlines. But what followed was what really revealed the emotional undertones of Kimmi's pain and permanently changed public perception in her favor. There was a shocking revelation from a fan site a few days following Maurice's tone-deaf remark. Reddit and Instagram users started sharing screenshots of supposed private text exchanges between Kimmi and her best pal that dated back more than a year. And it was awful what those communications showed. Kimmi writes, "He hugged me after the biopsy like it was a business handshake," in a devastating scene that occurred just 2 weeks after she was diagnosed with cancer. "I fear that he may no longer even notice me." Thousands of hearts were broken online by that one line alone. "He tells me he's tired of my sad face," said another message. "To keep him from feeling uncomfortable, I'm sick of acting like I'm fine." This one, which viewers saw mentioned on the show but never completely understood, came from what seemed to be the night following one of their therapy sessions. "When I lost my hair, the therapist asked him how he felt. I didn't feel anything," he remarked. "I simply knew that we needed to proceed, as if it were nothing. Just objectives and procedures, no melancholy or loss." After that, I sobbed for an hour in the car. Take a moment to process that. A woman fighting to survive, observing her physical transformation, her soul breaking, and her husband who is cold, unapproachable, and mechanical being emotionally distant but not malevolent. It didn't end there either. Maurice apparently declined to go to one of Kimmi's radiation appointments because he had a networking brunch that he couldn't miss, according to another series of direct messages purportedly written to her cousin. "I no longer even dispute. I simply shut down. If someone isn't fighting for me, I don't think I have the stamina to keep fighting for them." Social media was ablaze with the quotation. The emotional neglect expressed so clearly in those communications was too obvious for even ardent Maurice supporters to overlook. The marriage wasn't merely a failure. It was a woman being abandoned when she was at her most vulnerable. YouTubers, bloggers, and even cast members of LMC started to comment. A screenshot of one comment was reposted by Melody Holt, who wrote, "When silence screams louder than words, Kimmi, we see you." Destiny posted on Twitter, "This show ain't for the weak, but real life, real pain. That ain't for TV, that's survival. We all have flaws, but if you can't be there for your woman when she's sick, when she's scared, then what are you even doing on this earth, man?" said Martell. Yes, Martell Hull, of all people, in a podcast interview. Fans demanded answers when the text circulated online, and for the first time, Maurice was no longer shielded by his quiet. He was being indicted. What struck hardest, though? The slap wasn't it. The missed appointments weren't the cause. It wasn't even the absence of affection or tears. Thousands of people's hearts were genuinely broken by this one last message, which was submitted anonymously but was verified by several close friends and family. "I sometimes question whether he ever truly loved me or if he loved the thought of me more." Many women and people who have remained faithful, hopeful, and present for lovers who never completely showed up in return can relate to that statement. Don't write Kimmi off just yet, though, since she shocked everyone with a daring public move that had Maurice reeling just when everyone expected her to withdraw into silence.